Welcome back to your nightmares, my children. This is Mr. Midnight speaking. I welcome you all to my humble abode. So today we will look at 4 in the night, alone, scary stories that will terrify you and make you fear the darkness of the night that surrounds and engulfs everything. Let's begin, and always remember, the darkness always follows. I will now leave you with my narrator, so enjoy.
Never walk alone at night. So this was around late 2010, early 2011. I was 15 at the time and I was spending the weekend at my best friend's house. Her name is Talia, and 2 of my other friends, Jade and Shauna, were there too. Our friend Jack lived across town and he wanted us to come over to hang out. It was a 10 to 12 minute walk to get there, but it was 9 p.m. and a Saturday night, and Talia was skeptical about walking across town in the first place. So she stayed behind, but the rest of us figured since there were 3 of us walking there, we would be safe. And we were. So we get to Jack's house and he had been drinking out of his mother's liquor cabinet. He was 17 at the time. And 2 acquaintances of ours who were dating each other and having problems in their relationship were there drinking too. It was annoying for me to be there since none of us wanted to drink, and one of the acquaintances was drunkenly spilling her life story to me and how she wanted to break up with her boyfriend because she was in love with her ex, yada yada yada. Basically, I didn't care about. I barely knew this girl, but I listened and tried to help her through her drunken banter while we were there. So 11:30 p.m. hits, and Jade and Shauna decided to call Talia's mum, who treated us as if we were her own children, to come pick us up because, of course, no one wanted to walk back at almost midnight. Even with there being 3 of us, the drunk girl didn't want me to leave. So I felt bad and stayed behind and told Jade and Shauna that I'll just walk back later on. I didn't have a concept of fear. According to rumors at school, one of the most intimidating girls in our class always carried a pocket knife on me, was going through my goth stage, etc, etc. I knew the town like the back of my hand, so I didn't think it was such a big deal. I finally leave. And this is where it gets creepy. So I'm walking back across town to Tali's house by myself, texting Jade the whole time to make sure she was still awake so she could open the door for me. It was 12:30 a.m. and I was walking fairly fast, almost jogging, because I had a bad feeling about being out by myself. So I kept up the pace. I make it to the main street in the town, and Tali's house was 2 or 3 blocks away from it. A straight shot. I looked both ways before I crossed Main Street, and there was one car coming from my right in the direction, driving about 45 miles per hour. So I bolted across the street before the car came up, and as soon as I did that, the car comes to a screeching halt and whips itself onto the road that I was walking on. Luckily, I heard the screeching tires and my instincts kicked in, so I darted into the bushes in front of someone's house. Because my brain quickly comprehended that something just didn't seem right about a car driving so fast down the road. Speed limit in the town was 25 miles per hour. At this time of night, then making this quick turn out of nowhere. I stayed crouched in the bushes. They were thick bushes, and like I said, I was going through my gothic phase, so I was wearing all black, and I had the night to my advantage. And watched this car slowly creep down the road next to the house I was hiding outside of, almost like the people in the car were looking for me. I held my breath. I watched it continue down the road and turn around in a parking lot, then watched it head back up to Main Street. As soon as that car got to the stop sign opposite from where I was going, I bolted. I never ran so fast in my life. All the while I'm texting Jade with my difficult flip phone, telling her to open the door now. Everything was like it was on cue. I make it to the front steps of Talia's house, and as soon as I got to the first step, Jade opens the door and that same car comes flying down the road that I was on, hitting the gas and revving the engine, passing the house, almost as if the people in the car were mad. Jade seems me out of breath, barging into the house, asking me all these questions, and as soon as she locks the door, I tell her everything. The next morning, I told Talia, Sean and Talia's mum about what happened, and Talia's mum went white. Apparently, a man had been caught a few towns away from ours for stalking and assaulting another woman, and around the same late hours of the night. She pulled the news report up on her phone, and we read it, and that same car was in the news report. I do apologize for the long story, but I'm 21 now and I own a gun, and thinking about this still gives me shivers to this day. I can only imagine what could have happened if I didn't go with my gut that night. So, a creepy guy who likes to stalk and rape women, let's not meet. Terrified to be alone at night. This happened a few years ago to me when I was still living in my childhood home down in California. I had just inherited my family home, so my cousin decided to move in with my husband and I while she was attending a college nearby. My cousin and I were both working at the Lego store at the time, but I only worked mornings and my husband and cousin worked nights, so there were many nights where I was alone. A couple of weeks before this happened, I had been taking stuff out of my car when I realized a strange brown van with no back windows parked across the street. As I put the stuff in the trunk, the man in the van started making weird noises at me. I turned to see if I could get a look at his face, but his black Giants baseball cap was pulled down really far. Thinking he was just a creepy guy, I flipped him off and went back into the house. About 2 hours later, I went outside to go somewhere, and he was still parked across the street. Not thinking anything of it, I hopped in my car and headed to my friend's house. As I was driving, I looked in my rear view mirror and saw the same brown van following me. I turned on a whole bunch of streets and he followed me down all of them. I turned onto the road that my father-in-law lived on and parked, thinking if the guy tried anything, I could just run there and be safe. When I pulled over in front of my father-in-law's house, the van slowly drove by. I looked into the van and the man put his hand into a gun position, pointed at me, like with index and middle finger out and thumb pointed up, and said, "Bang!" really loud. After that he hauled ass and drove off. Now, I had always been a little leery of staying home alone. My house had always given me the creeps because of how poorly lit it was. When I was alone at night, I usually just stayed in the kitchen because of how bright it was. I was watching a TV show on my computer when all of a sudden I hear banging on the front door and the handle jiggling. It startled me for a moment until I looked at the time and saw it was around 10 p.m. and knew my cousin was going to be coming home from work about that time. I got up and opened the door, but nobody was on the porch. I shouted my cousin's name out, but still no response. I called my cousin's cell and immediately she was like, "Oh hey, I'm on my way home from work right now." Before I could say anything else, there was 3 extremely loud bangs on the door that connected the kitchen and the garage, and the knob was shaken violently. I slammed the front door, closed, locked and chained it, and ran for my room. My aunt called me while my cousin called the police, and I stayed under a blanket until my cousin arrived. When she came and got me, I was led outside to talk to the police. I was trying to explain what had happened, but the officers along the side of my house were distracting me. I walked over to where they were, but one of the police officers held me back. They opened the gate and saw that the door to my garage, which we always leave locked, was wide open. All of the officers in the area pulled out their guns and went into the garage, but nobody was in there. Afterwards, the police told me it was probably just some kids messing around. But if I ever get scared and home, to just call them and they'll send someone out. About a week later, I was watching something in my living room with my cousin and my husband. As I was passing by the window next to my front door, I realized there was a guy wearing the same baseball cap as the guy in the van standing outside on the sidewalk, staring at the house. When he noticed me watching, he immediately locked eyes with me and slowly gave me the creepiest smile I had ever seen. I turned and yelled for my husband to go out there, but when I turned around, he was gone. I will say though that the baseball cap in question is really generic, and a lot of Giants fans wear it, so I can't say it was the same exact guy, but it felt like it was. 3 days after that, I was home alone at night again. I was on edge, but I was trying to ignore it, telling myself that I was going to be okay. I was baking cookies in the kitchen when I thought I heard a knock at my sliding glass door. My whole body tensed up, and I slowly turned towards the door. The lights in the backyard were off and the kitchen ones were on, so the glare on the window made it impossible to see if someone was outside. Everything was silent for a few seconds before someone banged on the door again. I screamed, but felt paralyzed in fear. The person ran on the deck from the sliding glass door to the two windows in the living room and started knocking on them as well. They came back to the sliding glass door to knock and started trying to open the door. I finally came to my senses, grabbed my keys and ran outside into my car. I locked myself in my car and dialed 911. We sold the house shortly after that. I still have a hard time staying home alone, even though I'm 2 states away now. A man approached me and my kids in a deserted mall parking lot at 10 o'clock at night and started talking to my kids. So this happened about 5 years ago while I was 9 months pregnant. I was Christmas shopping at the mall with my then 7 and 15-year-old daughters one Saturday night in a very safe city with very low crime rate. There was Applebee's connected to the mall and we ended our shopping pretty late. And the mall stores were starting to close, so I took my kids to the connected Applebee's for a late dinner. We finish up eating at about 10 p.m. and leave out the Applebee's entrance into the practically deserted parking lot with shopping bags in tow. As we got to the car, I was in the middle of maneuvering the shopping bags on my arms to find my keys when a 50-ish-year-old crusty looking guy starts walking up from somewhere in the parking lot with shaggy grey white hair and a faded flannel shirt and old jeans. I noticed him briskly approaching when he was about 40 feet away, and he said, "This is a stick-up. Give me all your money." My blood ran cold, and I stared at him owlishly and shakingly and said, "What?" He then said he was just kidding and came up and stood right next to my daughters, who were standing on the other side of the car, waiting for me to unlock the car to let them in. He then starts making small talk with me and my girls. He's asking things like if they were being good girls for Santa, how old they were, if we got all our Christmas shopping done, what kind of things did we get, etc. He didn't seem drunk, high, slow, or mentally challenged at all. He was very coherent and seemed of sound mind. Mind you, I was a heavily pregnant woman, alone with my two daughters in a mostly deserted parking lot at 10 o'clock at night, who was being approached by a stranger who came and stood right next to my kids on the other side of the car, just shooting the breeze, talking to me and my kids with his hands in his pocket and occasionally looking over his shoulder. I didn't want to aggravate him, so I was politely conversing with him and trying to look calm and nonchalant while trying to disguise my frantic hands digging inside my giant purse for my car keys. This exchange went on for a couple of minutes while he periodically kept looking over his shoulder. I was slightly and silently panicking and trying to politely keep the situation from escalating by calmly and nonchalantly talking to him while also trying in vain to find my damned car keys to get us out of there. They were in there, hiding good. I felt that at any moment he was going to pull a knife or a gun or rob me, and my kids were right next to him, away from their mother on the other side of the car, and I couldn't find my bloody car keys to get my kids into the safety of the car. He kept trying to engage them in conversation, and I could see that my oldest daughter was a little weirded out, and she kept glancing at me to gauge my assessment reaction to this situation. Kids often tend to not recognize potential danger when they are with their parents, since they see us as their protectors. And being that he was only talking and acting friendly, and I was doing my best to stay calm, they were oblivious to the alarming situation we were all in. And being 9 months pregnant, and that I was no match for this full-grown man, especially if he was hiding a weapon on him. While still desperately digging for my keys, I tried to politely give him hints that the conversation was over by saying things like, "It was nice chatting with you, but I gotta get these kids to bed," and "It was nice meeting you," and telling my girls to say that it was nice meeting him too. My polite attempts to get this guy to leave wasn't working because he kept sidestepping my attempts and asking them what their favorite school subjects are and how nice young ladies they were, etc., while I was struggling with the shopping bags and digging in my giant cluttered purse for my car keys. My outgoing 7-year-old was completely oblivious to how not okay this situation was because he was being friendly, and because of the whole "I'm with mummy so I'm safe" child mentality. So she started to talk about what she picked out for daddy for Christmas and started enthusiastically talking about kid stuff and asking him if he knew what Minecraft was, etc., and keeping this creep from leaving us alone by keeping him engaged in conversation. They didn't realize that I was becoming desperate to get them the hell out of there. Then I suddenly felt this sinking feeling of dread when I realized that I may have lost my keys in the mall and that we were stuck outside with a strange man who kept looking over his shoulders and was showing no signs of walking away. And I was thinking that he was waiting for the perfect moment to pounce. All he had to do was grab one of my girls and threaten their life, knowing it would make me do whatever he wanted as long as he wouldn't hurt them. I started to feel my adrenaline start to pike, and my heart and stomach started doing flip-flops, and I felt like that at any moment shiz was going to do, and shiz was going to go down, as the gravity of realizing that there were no other people or witnesses around and that we were totally alone with him, and that moment the odds were stacked against us, and that he has his chance. Then he all of a sudden was like, "Okay, it was nice talking with you. See you later," and walked off in the same direction as to which he came. It wasn't until then I found my car keys and I unlocked the door and told my kids to get in fast. I got in too, unlocked the doors and started the car and drove the hell out of there. My 15-year-old light-heartedly and jokingly said, "Okay, that was weird," and laughed. I was overwhelmed with relief, and then I was confused over what just happened. I thought to myself, why the hell would a guy of seemingly sound mind think it totally acceptable to go out of his way just to approach a woman and her kids in a deserted parking lot late at night just to chit chat? But being that nothing bad happened, I brushed it off and joked about it too. When we got home, my husband greeted us and asked us how shopping went. And I said it went well, and my 15-year-old told him what happened in the parking lot and how weird it was, and was kinda joking about it. I started joking too, saying how I was mentally having a panic attack while trying to look calm, and I started making fun of myself by telling my husband how I was attempting to inconspicuously rummage through my purse to find my car keys. My husband went completely white, and I acknowledged his horrified look of alarm, and I assured him that, albeit creepy, the guy was just talking and eventually left on his own. Now, my father-in-law is a retired sheriff deputy, and my husband went through police academy training after graduating high school. He decided to go to business school instead of becoming a cop. And being that the knowledge he gained from that, plus growing up with a cop for a dad, I found out why my husband looked absolutely horrified when I told him the details. What my husband told me completely rattled me to the bone. My husband told me that he was 100% sure that the reason why that guy was hanging around us and chit-chatting was because he was waiting for me to unlock my car. And the reason why he was standing next to our kids was because once I unlocked the car and the kids started to get inside, he was most likely going to force himself into the car with the kids and hold a knife or gun to them to gain leverage on me, to force me to cooperate, knowing that I wouldn't abandon my kids, or which would force me to get into the car with them and do whatever he wanted me to do, which most likely would be to drive to a remote location to God knows what. And being that he wasn't wearing a mask suggests that his intentions were to also leave no witnesses to identify him. I then remember that he was positioned by the backseat passenger door while my 7-year-old was standing by waiting to get in. My husband then told me that the most likely reason why the guy ended up leaving was because it took so long for me to find my keys, and the longer it took, the more anxious and spooked it made him. And that whole time, I was desperate to find my car keys, which through some sort of divine intervention stayed hidden in my purse, thus saving us from potentially being abducted. Let's not meet again. He asked for me by name. Yes. Call 911. I've never seen him in my life. I was watching my daughter's kids while she and her husband go out of town. They have a teenage daughter. Let's say her name is Alyssa. At like 3 a.m., I'm woken up by a weird rustling sound and look out the window and see movement. I see a boy emerge from the bushes on the side of the house. I saw a bike tossed on the lawn that definitely wasn't ours. My first thought it was that there was a burglar casing houses. But since he looked young and came through on a bike, I figured scaring him straight would be enough for him to decide to head home. Didn't want to ruin a teenager's life by calling the cops straight away. So I went out on the porch, flipped the lights on and said, "Can I help you?" in my classroom voice. This guy looked surprised but not nervous. He was wearing a Letterman style jacket, but once I got a clear view of him in the streetlights, he seemed much older than my granddaughter, gruff and more wiry than athletic. He walked up closer to the house and said, "Yeah, I'm looking for Alyssa." I gave him a disapproving look, hoping he'd realize he came looking for a girl late at night, and a grumpy old person answered, "It's time to split." I'm thinking what must have happened is Alyssa knew her parents were going out of town, and maybe before she knew I'd be staying over, told a secret older boyfriend to come over. It was late and I was alone with several kids, so I didn't want him coming any closer to the house. I also thought it was weird he came so late and wanted to be sure Alyssa actually wanted to talk to him. So I said, "I'm sorry, who?" And he said, "Alyssa. You know Alyssa last name? This is her house." I thought he knew her full name. They must be at least friends. I said, "You wait there." He started to walk up and I felt a sick burning in my gut. Instinct kicked in. I yelled, "No, stop, freeze." Then readjusted and said, "You stay right there. This is private property. Don't take a step closer. Wait there." So I go in and Alyssa is asleep, just one room over from where the rustling first occurred. And I wake her up and say something to the effect of, "I don't know what the big idea was to have friends over this time of night, and you tell them to go home." She has no clue what I'm talking about. I say, "There's a guy outside asking for you." Confused, she gets up and goes to the window. She sees him and goes white as a sheet. "He asked for me?" "Yeah." "By name?" "Yes." "Call the police. I've never seen him in my life." I called 911 immediately, but as I was on the phone with them, Alyssa started tugging at my arm. "He's coming up." I had younger kids in the house to think about, so I kept the door latched and pulled it just open enough for the lad and yelled, "I asked my husband, and none of us know an Alyssa last name. Leave my property or I'm calling 911. He got angry and started yelling for her to come out. Thankfully, the police came pretty quickly, and when he heard the sirens, he grabbed the bike and ran off. I watched where he was running and he jumped into the passenger side of a car without headlights or front plates and sped off. The police followed in the same direction once I pointed them, but they didn't get him. They advised us to take all her social media details offline if she was sure she didn't know this person, and said they'd had a couple of similar reports recently and were looking into it. I got a heavy duty lock and she slept in my room for the remainder of my visit.
Well, my children, I thank you all for listening. I hope these four terrifying stories frightened you, because I love the taste of fear. I'll see you again very soon. So until then, love the darkness. Love it, because it always, and always will, follow